The year is 1859. Out in the unforgiving, sun-baked alkali flats of the Nevada Territory, there is no sound but the wind and the crunch of boots on the dust. Yet the air is thick with a dream so potent it drives men mad, makes them billionaires overnight, and utterly changes the destiny of the United States. This is the Comstock lode, the richest silver discovery in human history. Every American knows the name. Few, however, know the astonishing true story of the quiet, fiercely intelligent, and ultimately tragic woman who financed the dreams of the men who built San Francisco, saved the Union during the Civil War, and was ultimately betrayed by the very fortune she created. Her name was Mary Ellen Pleasant, and she was a black woman who dared to stand as tall as any white capitalist in the Wild West, a fact that history fought desperately to forget. The dust of Virginia City, Nevada tasted like dried sweat and crushed silver ore. It coated the tongue, crunched beneath the teeth, and clung to the rough woolen coats of the thousands of men who had stampeded here from every corner of the globe. They were called Argonauts, fortune seekers, the most desperate and determined individuals in the restless American West. But in the late 1850s, their desperation had a singular focus: the monstrous, unassuming hill known as Sun Mountain, home to the Comstock lode. The setting: Virginia City, 1859. To understand the astonishing power of the Comstock, one must first grasp the sheer chaotic energy of the boomtown it spawned. Virginia City, perched precariously on the side of Mount Davidson, was an architectural absurdity, a makeshift metropolis built on a slope so steep that many buildings had a basement on one side and a fourth story on the other. It was a city of extremes. $100 bottles of champagne served in saloons where the floor was packed dirt. Opera singers from Paris performing for miners who hadn't changed their shirts in a week. And the daily deafening thunder of steam-powered machinery struggling to drill deeper into the earth than man had ever gone before. The initial discovery, a glint of bluish stuff in the mud that was initially dismissed as worthless, was officially made by two illiterate prospectors, Peter O'Reilly and Patrick McLaughlin. But the real wealth, the vein that would eventually pump out over $400 million in silver and gold, equivalent to tens of billions in modern currency, required capital, immense, unimaginable capital. This was not a gold panning operation. This was industrial-scale mining, requiring deep shafts, massive pumps to fight the subterranean hot springs, and an endless stream of timber to shore up the collapsing tunnels. The men who stepped into this vacuum of financing, the Bonanza Kings, are the figures immortalized in history: John W. McKay, James Graham Fair, and William Sharon. But they were all mere conduits for a more elusive, more powerful financial current that flowed from the glittering, sophisticated parlors of San Francisco. And that current, astonishingly, ran straight to the desk of Mary Ellen Pleasant, the patroness of possibility. Mary Ellen Pleasant. Mary Ellen Pleasant was a ghost in the financial halls of San Francisco in the 50s and 60s. Officially, she was a respected, if unusually independent, boarding house proprietor and chef. Unofficially, she was the city's most formidable and invisible capitalist. Born into slavery in Georgia, or perhaps free in Philadelphia, her origins were deliberately opaque. She had arrived in San Francisco during the gold rush, not to mine, but to bank. She possessed three things that no other black person and few women of any race could claim: a vast network of white allies and debtors, an almost preternatural ability to predict economic trends, and a fortune amassed by shrewd, quiet investing in the burgeoning city. Her boarding houses were not mere inns; they were confidential information clearinghouses. Her guests were the city's most powerful financiers, politicians, and judges. As she served them dinner, she served herself an education in the intricate, often corrupt flow of money. Her connection to the Comstock lode was forged through an unlikely partner, George Albers, a wealthy German financier, and later the infamous William Ralston, founder of the Bank of California. Ralston was the orchestrator of the Comstock's development, the man who understood that to control the mines, you had to control the mills, the water rights, and the transportation. But even Ralston needed seed money, especially for the high-risk, unproven ventures. Pleasant was the source. Historical records and later court documents confirm that she secretly provided a substantial portion of the initial capital to the men who would eventually become the biggest players. Why the secrecy? Because in 1860s America, a black woman could not legally enforce contracts or even own property in her own name without severe risk. She was the ghost investor, routing her money through trusted, often indebted white proxies. The astonishing scope of Pleasant's ambition was not limited to finance. It was inseparable from her fight against slavery and racial injustice. Her Comstock fortune, she saw, was a weapon for the abolitionist cause. The most dramatic and perhaps most fact-rich chapter of her early life in California centered around the case of Archie Lee. Archie was a young enslaved man brought to California in 1857 by his master, Charles Stovall, a recent immigrant from Mississippi. California was a free state, and its state constitution, despite allowing some anti-black legislation, guaranteed the right of enslaved people to claim their freedom upon arrival. Stovall attempted to take Archie back to Mississippi. Mary Ellen Pleasant learned of this plan. Her response was immediate, audacious, and a perfect illustration of her strategy. She mobilized the Underground Railroad, Western Division. Pleasant used her network of contacts to raise funds for Archie's legal defense and organized a constant watch on Stovall. She used her capital to buy influence. She quietly financed the most prominent abolitionist lawyers in San Francisco, ensuring the case was argued with maximum force and publicity. She manipulated the system. When the initial ruling went against Archie in a lower court, a ruling that shocked the state as it essentially nullified California's free status, Pleasant didn't appeal on legal grounds alone. She used her wealth and political connections to pressure key officials, essentially turning the public opinion and the courts into her allies. The final, high-stakes moment came when Pleasant secured the legal services of Colonel Charles W. M. Smith and personally oversaw the final appeal to the California Supreme Court. Her intervention was so crucial that the landmark 1858 ruling, which ultimately freed Archie Lee and set a major precedent against slavery in California, is often credited directly to her efforts. The Archie Lee case was a de facto victory for the Union cause in the West, 3 years before the Civil War even began. The money she spent on this legal fight was replenished, and then dwarfed by her investments in the burgeoning Comstock lode. The silver that poured out of the Nevada desert wasn't just fueling the Gilded Age, it was financing the political battles for freedom. The fire below, engineering the bonanza. The narrative then plunges back into the mines, where the greatest technical challenges in American engineering history were being faced. The Comstock lode was a geological nightmare. The deeper the miners dug, the hotter it became. Water, heated by geothermal vents, flooded the shafts in torrents. Miners were dying of heat stroke and being scalded alive. The temperature in the deepest drifts, sometimes over 3,000 feet down, was approaching 130 degrees Fahrenheit or 54 degrees Celsius. The solution was the Sutro Tunnel. Adolf Sutro, a Prussian immigrant, was a visionary and a persistent irritant to the Bonanza Kings. He proposed digging a 4-mile-long drainage and ventilation tunnel straight into the mountain from the valley floor. The tunnel was a monumental task, costing millions and taking over a decade to complete, 1869 to 1878. Its primary function was to drain the scalding water, ventilate the toxic air, and provide an escape route. Pleasant's connection here is crucial and astonishingly underreported. While the Bonanza Kings initially fought Sutro, they preferred to control the flow of capital by using expensive pumps, which they owned. Sutro needed outside investors. Pleasant was one of the early, quiet financial backers of the Sutro Tunnel Company. She saw the long-term potential. Whoever controlled the drainage controlled the entire Comstock. Her ability to see the infrastructure of wealth, not just the raw resource, was what made her a financial genius. The story will continue to follow the silver trail. The Civil War and Comstock silver, How the silver from the Comstock was secretly shipped to the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia, providing the Union with the hard currency necessary to fund the war effort and prevent economic collapse. Facts: Nevada was granted statehood in 1964, largely to secure its silver wealth for the Union. The Big Bonanza: the discovery of the final, largest ore body in 1873, which created the final wave of Comstock kings, including the Irish kings, Mackay, Fair, Flood, and O'Brien, who Pleasant had helped finance and support in their early struggles. The tragic betrayal: the inevitable climax where, due to the machinations of her white business partners, particularly the powerful Bank of California's leadership, Mary Ellen Pleasant is deliberately sidelined and financially ruined by the men who she had helped make millionaires. She spent the rest of her life fighting in court to reclaim the fortune she had earned, a devastating, documented, and true story of betrayal rooted in racism and greed. This is the opening of a true American epic, a story that begins with a shovelful of dust and ends with a betrayal that reshaped the forgotten history of American capitalism and racial justice. The astonishing truth is that one of the single most influential figures in the making of the American West was a black woman whom history successfully silenced.